morning and welcome to the Daily Dawg. Today is game day. It is Saturday, September 13th. This is the culmination of Game Week 3, Tennessee week, where we are ready to watch the Dogs go to Knoxville, Tennessee, and take on the Volunteers. This is the road opener for Georgia and the SEC opener for both teams, and we have covered that a lot already this week. We've talked a lot about the history of the Georgia-Tennessee series and why it would be really great to just keep adding to our victories total. And we've already won 8 straight in the series, and we'd like to win 9 straight before possibly Tennessee drops off our every year schedule. Again, when the SEC goes to 9-game schedule starting next year, it's not that Tennessee would never be on the schedule. They just probably are not going to end up on our annual schedule. Florida and Auburn will be our 2 permanent rivals. And that leaves up in discussion what the other team would be. It's a kind of a fairness, and there's been a little bit of a survey looking around what the fans and what all the other teams want. Different teams have different wishes about who their rival would be. So South Carolina would make a lot of sense as a team we've played year in and year out for many years, but not in the last couple. You could even argue Vanderbilt or Kentucky, all the teams from the East really, except for maybe Missouri, because we just didn't have as much history playing them as we did the other teams in the SEC. This is sort of part 2 of our final breakdown of the game. As we talked about history, we talked about coaches, Josh Heupel. We just went through what Tennessee is under Josh Heupel. And let me just say a word for a moment, if I haven't made this clear. Josh Heupel has turned things around at Tennessee. Tennessee was a little bit of a laughing stock's maybe too strong a word, but Tennessee was not getting it done, okay? And they had definitely fallen from being one of the top 15 teams of all time in college football, like we discussed, to being a team that is, how would we describe it? I would say, well, I mean, they were wandering. I don't have their most recent record, but I mean, they were a team that had fallen off on recruiting, had not seen elite players, and they were getting beat consistently. They had long losing streaks, which they still have against us. They saw Vanderbilt beat them a few times, Kentucky, teams that they used to beat year in and year out. Even Florida, though also wandering in the wilderness a little bit, was still playing pretty well against them. And, of course, they had a long losing streak against Alabama, which we saw them snap like 3 seasons ago, and then they ripped up their goalposts and threw them in the Tennessee River. But Josh Heupel has definitely made this program respectable. I mean, they are let me just see here. I got my show notes. I was just trying to see. So, last 4 years, I said his overall record the other day, which is like 37-16, but something along those lines. But I think it's worth noting, again, 7-6 4 years ago. So he came in immediately. They had been 3-7 the year before in the COVID season, the 10-game COVID season. So he came in immediately and made them more respectable. Then he, like a lot of coaches, and we're going to talk about this phenomena sometime. I'm sure you guys are aware of this. There's this interesting phenomena out there where coaches, in some cases, seem to almost peak in their second season. Maybe sometimes it's third, sometimes it's first. Larry Coker at Miami took over a loaded Miami team years ago and won the national championship in his first season and was gone within a few years. So it can vary as to which, adjust the camera here. We are working on having a camera for video podcast. I do intend to start taking this to a video podcast and open up a YouTube channel. So we are simulcasting on the recording. I don't know if this recording is going to make it to podcast yet, because we need to get the podcast out. It is game day. It is already Saturday morning. Game day is going to be on TV from Knoxville soon, and all good dog fans are going to want to watch what's going on there. And then we got a little bit of break between game day and the game to get your tailgate ready, get your friends together, get your viewing situation set up. So we'll get back to that in a minute. Or let's get back to Josh Heupel and talk about Tennessee, though. So, again, he's really restored order. He came in first year. Oh, and I was saying that, coaches, if you look around, a lot of times coaches in their second season really explode. And we've even seen it in our world. Mark Richt, in his second season, took Georgia to a 13-1 record, just outside the national championship discussion that year. to a Sugar Bowl where we beat Florida State. Again, finished 13-1 in the season, number 3 overall ranking, and propelled us back into the discussion of the elite and the teams that needed to be talked about when we're talking about who's in the mix for SEC and national championship. And that was in his second season. Kirby Smart also had a sort of pedestrian first season by the standards we're used to. Now he 8-5 in that first season, some ups and downs, including the last time we lost to Tennessee, by the way, which was on that horrible Hail Mary, an exchange of Hail Marys. We had just taken a long bomb touchdown to take the lead with seconds to go, and Tennessee gets to midfield and chunks their own Hail Mary and ends up winning the game. So good that we wandered into that. That was the last time we actually lost to Tennessee. So, and that was in Kirby Smart's first year. We went 8-5 that year, and then he, the next year, had us in the national championship game. So, you really see the progression of coaches. A lot of times when they come in and they really gel with a team, it seems like whatever it is, that first season is just sorting out the details, and the second season is when all of a sudden it just kicks in and explodes. We saw that even back Jim Donnan. First season, he, I think, went 5-6, and there was some grumbling. We lost to some teams that you wouldn't think we'd lose to. And then the next year, he was 10-2 in 1997. And we beat Florida for the first time in like 7 years with the Robert Edwards game and the 4 touchdowns, 37-17. So second-year coaches often explode, and Josh Heupel did. And that doesn't mean they're only good for their second year, but I think a lot of times it is a mark of a good coach. If you see a coach that's taken over a team and they're, they were 1-10 or 2-10, 3-9 or something like that, and then the new coach comes in and he gets them to 5-6 or 6-6, I don't know. I guess a good example. Here's a question right now going on in the SEC. Billy Napier, right? Looks like he might have turned the corner the end of last season. Gators won like 5 in a row down the stretch. And as we get closer to the Florida game, we'll examine Florida a little more. I haven't looked at them a lot, honestly. Just they haven't. I mean, again, let's stay on the path of being a true Gator hater. Check in with Brandon Adams on the podcast, on the Dawg Nation podcast, and see what the count is up to. How many days since Florida last beat Georgia, and that's certainly worth never losing sight of. But honestly, I have not spent a lot of time following their program because there are other teams that are a little more relevant that we have to look at and compare, like we've been doing, like Texas and even Ohio State and national programs when we're talking about the national championship, and Texas, Alabama lately when we're talking about the SEC championship. Florida's a hurdle that we need to get over, but they have not really been the team that's been in our sights. So I haven't really paid attention to exactly what happened. A lot of times you'll see when a team gets on a roll like that and gets a lot of credit for winning out, closing the season strong, winning 5 or 6 straight games in their bowl game. A lot of times when you look at it, it's like, well, yeah, but they already played Georgia and LSU and Tennessee, and they lost 2 out of 3 of those games. And then they played a bunch of mediocre teams or not great teams the rest of the way, and they won them. So maybe it would have been easy to predict that they should have won those games, and we shouldn't be all excited like, oh, look, they won 5 rounds. So I don't know. We'll take a look at Florida's schedule when we get closer. But simple truth is, it looked like Napier's been recruiting well. So it looked like the team had maybe turned a corner. They finished with 8 wins, I think, last year, 8-5, something like that. And obviously they started this season in the top 25, and then they embarrassingly lose at home to South Florida. South Florida may be better than people think. They may be a top 25 team all this year. They probably still shouldn't have beaten Florida at home if Florida's doing what they should be doing. So it's still probably an embarrassing loss, but embarrassing in a different way. Not embarrassing like they lost to a team that's ridiculous. They lost to a team that's probably legit, but they still shouldn't have. I mean, SEC team shouldn't be losing to a team like South Florida at home. Not a team that has aspirations for being a top 25 team or having something to say about who wins or loses the SEC. And that's certainly what Florida expects at a minimum. And the way they're recruiting, that's the conversation they should be in. So what I was trying to say is, to make the point, by comparison, Josh Heupel came in was 7-6, so he immediately turns the team from 3-7 to 7-6. That's a great start. But in his second year, he has arguably his best year, and we've debated a little bit: was last year his best year, or 10-3 and in the playoffs? And I know Tennessee was excited to be in the playoff, but let's face it, they would not have been in the playoff had the playoff not expanded. So this isn't saying, oh my gosh, Tennessee finally got into the playoff after 10 years of trying. They didn't get into the same playoff that they were not in before. They got into this 12-team playoff. Okay. So we were accommodating more people now. So you have to take that into account. It's certainly going to be a measuring stick that teams look at their coaches and, oh, we made the playoff. And this has already infected pro sports because, like in basketball, and almost 2/3 of the teams make the playoff. And so, the standard is, okay, we make the playoff, but, it normalizes. Fans aren't suckered into the 500 club playoff thing as being that exciting in pro sports. And fans and ownership tends to realize, even when you make a playoff that's a weak playoff like that, where half the league gets in, you don't just get granted contract status over and over again as a coach just for making the playoffs. You actually have to win a series or two in advance and show some progress. So, I don't think we're fooled. I mean, everybody talks about how exciting it is to see teams be relevant all the way down the season, through the whole season. Now that we have this expanded playoff, more fan bases and more teams are relevant. Okay. Well, you're relevant in the sense that, like, you're getting a freebie, and so then the question is, are you going to do something with your freebie? I mean, that's really what it boils down to, right? So that might be a little harsh to when we're talking about Tennessee last year. Tennessee was a legitimately good team. They lost to Arkansas, which they shouldn't have lost, but Arkansas is an SEC team. They've got some talent, and you never know. They're going to beat some good teams. They're going to lose to some teams they shouldn't. That's Arkansas. And, look, we're favorable to Arkansas a little bit. Sam Pittman helped us win national championship, putting together our dominant offensive lines. And I think we would all like a little more Sam Pittman in our offensive line right now. I think we feel like if we had the Sam Pittman offensive lines, then we wouldn't even be wondering, is this going to be, what's the prediction in today's game? The prediction in today's game, if we had the confidence that we used to have in our offensive line 4 or 5 years ago, the prediction for today's Georgia-Tennessee game would probably be how big is going to be the win. Is it going to be a 7-point win? Is it going to be a 20-point win, a 17-point win? I think that's how people would feel. So, okay, we've looped all over the place. Sam Pittman's at Arkansas, beat Tennessee last year. Point is, last year Tennessee had 2 losses in the regular season, then got waxed by Ohio State in the playoffs. So was that Josh Heupel's best year because they made the playoff? They did finish in the AP poll number 9, or was his second season, and this was the point, because I was making the point that coaches seem to explode in their second season. The second season coach phenomena is one you often have to look out for. We've seen that in our world. We've seen that in other places. Gene Chizik, I think, when he won the national championship at Auburn in 2010, I think that was his second season. And then he had a third season, which was terrible, and he was out by his fourth season. So, most of the time, my point is, if a coach is going to connect, doesn't mean that if you don't win a national championship in your second season, that's the peak, and then you should get rid of your coach. You'd start to think, okay, so should we hire a coach, win a national championship in our second season, or try, and if we fall short, then fire him, and then give the next guy. And then every 2 or 3 years, we keep hiring new guys, because we're chasing the second year phenomenon. People have actually asked me that before because I've talked a lot about the second year phenomenon. And the answer is no. What I'm trying to get at here is, look, Josh Heupel maybe had his best season in his second year. He went 11-2, and they finished number 6 in the country. And you look at the statistics, they were like 4-2 against top 25 teams. By any measure, they had a really great season. They still lost to us. But they had a great season. So, but they've continued to be good from there. I mean, they lost some pieces of that team. They had to reload, get a new quarterback. They came back the next year. They're 9-4, still relevant, but and then they bounced back last year. They're 10-2. They're in the top 10 in the final week or two of the final weeks of the season. They make the playoff as an at-large team. So, Josh Heupel has elevated this team from just lost to they are a contender now. year in and year out. They're especially with the expanded playoff. That's the point we're making. So I think but the point there is you saw that he connected with the team, he's connected with his environment, and he had that huge elevation in year two. Doesn't mean it's over, or you're never going to win that national championship if you didn't win it in year two, or the SEC championship, or whichever conference you're in. It just means if you don't get there in year two, I wonder if you're ever going to get there. So that's where back to Napier for a moment in Florida, since we're wandering off the rabbit trail real quick. With Florida, I wonder if he's going to get there because he didn't have that surge in year two. He still hasn't gotten over it. Last year, they had a winning record for the first time. So, and now they've lost to South Florida in their second game of this season. So now you start to look at it and say, he's back on the hot seat. People don't know what's going to happen to Florida. We'll have to wait and see. It'll be interesting to see how it unfolds. But I do wonder if he was ever really destined to connect to this team and get it to where they want it to go, because you look at it and it's like, well, he didn't really explode in that second or third season. He's kind of been just dragging it along. And Florida's a place where I think you can explode, right? I mean, they've won national championships. They've had Heisman trophies. They're not one of the 15 greatest teams of all time, in part because they don't have the same historical record that, say, even Georgia or not even Georgia or even Tennessee is what I was going to say. Alabama, Ohio State, Texas, they don't have that kind of history, but they're in the next tier. They're in the next group. And especially because even though they don't have the longevity, the years of top 25 and the years of winning records and the overall cumulative wins from deep back in their history as early as Georgia or Tennessee or Alabama. Their modern history has been fantastic, right? Starting from the Steve Spurrier era forward, they started accumulating great players. They started accumulating Heisman Trophy winners. They have more Heisman Trophy winners than we do. And until recently, they'd had more modern national championships. So again, that's another important thing we helped correct in history by winning a couple modern era national championships back to back, put that with our 1980 national championship. Now in the last, 30, 40, 50 years or something, you look back and say, well, Florida's won three, we've won three. So, it's something I was not happy to be trailing Florida in for a long time. So I'm glad we're not anymore. Okay, so we've rabbit trailed all over the place. Point is, Josh Heupel has restored order, and he has made this a legitimate team. I picked heavily on his offense and called it gimmicky. And I also want to speak to something. So I was listening last night to just trying to get a feel for what the national media and other people who follow the SEC, guys like Greg McElroy, who are on the national broadcast for ESPN, but also appear regularly on the SEC channel, SEC network. And I listened to, again, some more breakdown from Aaron Murray on his Mac and Murray show. I think I called that new, by the way, which I just wasn't that familiar with it. And I didn't find it, I guess, the year before. I don't know exactly when they started it, and when I looked at their episode, it looked like they only had this season's episodes posted. So it looked like it was basically not much older than my show. It looks like they've been doing this for a little while, at least another season or two. So anyway, always like to correct things when I figure out I said something wrong in the past. So I called it a newer show. I guess it's newer, but it's not that new. Also listen to Joel Klatt from Fox Sports, and who's on the Big Noon Saturday and does the Fox Big Noon game broadcast and everything. And I think he has a very reasonable take. I don't love watching the Fox coverage. And I rarely do, and I don't think many of us SEC fans are that familiar with them or watch them because, again, they're tied, they're all in on the Big Ten, so we only really have reason to intersect with them consistently if you have a game like the opening game this year with Texas and Ohio State. But then again, I think, the Lee Corso thing overrode that. Everybody was watching that, and they even simulcast Lee Corso's final headgear pick on Fox's Big Noon Saturday. So my point is, Joel Klatt's a very reasonable guy, and I do follow some of his stuff from time to time. And so where I'm heading is I see a lot of people. I also read Seth Emerson and Joe Rexrode, I think. I don't know how to say his last name. I hadn't heard it out loud, but he's another writer with The Atlantic. The Athletic. No, sorry, not The Atlantic. The Athletic. So the two of them put together their prediction columns. Joe Rexrode follows the Tennessee side more. Seth Emerson is, like I said, moved into all things SEC, but still focuses in on Georgia and has long experience in Georgia. So they went through and broke down the game and talked about what they thought would happen, and then gave their individual predictions. And Seth, they both saw a close game. And Seth Emerson said that he thinks Georgia wins the close game, and Joe said that he thinks that Tennessee wins the close game. So everybody kind of lining up behind their respectives. Joel Klatt, his take was that he, like a lot of people, had moved with the momentum this week. Look how great Tennessee started out. The basic narrative here is Tennessee's still a top 25 team, but we don't expect them to compete for the SEC. That's the beginning season narrative. Then Tennessee blows the doors off a couple teams that they should have, and everybody kind of all of a sudden is like, hey, big momentum towards Tennessee. Maybe they're better than we thought. And there's room for them to find other teams to be concerned about, because Texas didn't look dominant. They didn't go up to Ohio State and win the game, or even though they lost by only a touchdown, they're certainly still in the discussion. They didn't look dominant. They didn't, they could have lost a one possession game, but it could have been a masterpiece of offensive football. And I think people still would have been like, well, Texas lost the game, but they look great. If Arch Manning had thrown for 330 yards and 4 touchdowns, and the defense let him down, Ohio State also had a great game and just nipped it in the end and slid ahead, maybe won 34-31 or something on a last-minute field goal after a game was tied, people would have a whole different view of Texas. But Texas goes out and they look inept on offense. And the main reason people were enthused about Texas, even though their roster is a very complete roster, like us, they're lean heavily on a very athletic, fast, and NFL talent-rich defense, and a good overall offense, and just good overall offensive or good overall team talent. The main reason people were high on Texas is because they had Arch Manning, and Arch Manning, in many people's minds, starts as a Heisman Trophy contender. So again, that may never have been a legitimate take, but this is what happened. So the first, preseason, everybody has these expectations, and now there's room to shift. So the shift is suddenly people are looking at Tennessee. And look, we've left room open for Tennessee. In this game, the comparison is, a few weeks ago, people were like, this will be a road test for Georgia, but we're really looking at the Alabama game. Well, then Alabama goes out and loses to Florida State. Doesn't look like Alabama. There's questions about Kalen DeBoer's job security, beatdowns of Louisiana Monroe, notwithstanding last week. Still, nobody feels very good about where that is. And we'll get a lot of conversation over the next 2 weeks after today's game. Then we'll have an off week, and Alabama will have an off week. So there'll be a lot of time to ponder and ruminate and discuss, and then get to the Alabama game. And this will be another huge measuring stick for both of these teams, right? Where is Georgia following whatever happens today? And where is Alabama? And because these are both teams that are expected to be contenders for the SEC. But once Alabama showed that maybe they're not a contender for the SEC, once Georgia showed that, like, well, look, maybe we thought they were just going to reload and be number 4 or number 5 again, but then they're looking at our offense and they're saying, I don't know, I don't trust this offense. So there's room in everybody's perception to adopt other teams to come in. So there's been movement towards Tennessee, undoubtedly. We've all seen that this week, since the beginning of the season. This was another game that was going to be a good test for Georgia. Now you have at least 50% of the media and people out there thinking this is not just a test for Georgia. This is a game Georgia's going to lose. Georgia's not ready to win this game. So Joel Klatt, getting back to this, his prediction was he broke it down. He did a really great job. And I want to say something too. He reminded me of something I talked about. Heupel's defense being a little gimmicky, the idea of spreading wide, putting the wide receivers all the way out to the side, trying to get isolation and make you commit to the defense, and then having the strong run game. We talked about that yesterday, that when you complement that with a strong run game in the middle, you're forcing defenses before you even snap the ball to just look at the configuration of the field and decide what do they want to do. They're going to line up man on man, linebackers in the center, defensive backs and safeties out wide. If your safeties are out wide to help with the wide receivers, then that gives a look that says they're going to run up the middle. They have strong blocking, strong run game up the middle, and now you don't have much help there. So if they can block your linebackers and block your defensive line, they bust through the line. Your safeties are out wide to try and cover those explosive plays from the wide receivers. They're just going to run up the middle. Okay, and we saw that last time we were in Knoxville, by the way. I'll remind you that the game started with Tennessee busting through the line for a 75 or 80-yard touchdown, wherever I don't remember where the kickoff was, but basically first play from scrimmage, their running back busts through the line. It just essentially runs untouched down the center of the field, because apparently we did just what I was talking about. We must have expected a pass on first play. Safeties bailed out to the sides. The middle of the field was open. They got the right blocking. They came out charged up behind their home crowd. They blocked into the second level. They opened up a hole, and he was gone. And, that's what this offense is designed to do, is just create these huge, scoring opportunities because they have spread you thin. Now, I don't remember exactly what the flow of the game was, but that might have been the last time they scored until like the fourth quarter. Whatever it was, from there, we ripped off however many unanswered, and it was another beatdown, and it wasn't a super competitive game. But there was a lot of enthusiasm on that first play, and actually, I think they've led, if not all of the last 4 games initially, they've led at least the last couple. They led last year 10-0. Same thing. We kind of fumbled around a little bit and had a little hard time getting started, and gave up a couple plays, and they got into the end zone and they got a field goal, and they're up 10-0 in the first quarter. And then we go on to win the rest of the game 31-7. So, keep that in mind as the game starts today. I'm not making an exact prediction on how the game's going to start. I'm just telling you, keep that in mind, because it certainly could be something we see today in a home charged atmosphere. Tennessee could get off to a hot start. That doesn't mean whatever we decide we think is going to happen isn't going to happen in the game, or that Georgia's on its way to a beatdown. They've been off to a hot start each of the last couple of years. So anyway, what did Joel Klatt say? What I was talking about. He added some depth to what I was trying to talk about the hypo offense. And he described part of why when they get those wide receivers out wide, and this is really interesting, they are doing reads. So in other words, the wide receiver, when a quarterback drops back and he's looking at the field, we talk about, he reads his progression, he goes through his progression, checks his number 1, 2, 3, 4 receiver, picks which throw, makes it. He's watching for the route. And in most offenses, what happens is the play is called with a primary route, secondary, third, fourth. Everybody, 4 wide receivers go out there, 4 routes. The quarterback's supposed to know what each one's running, and then he checks to see which one's open. He makes the throw. But the route was predetermined. You're going to run, this route. You're going to run that route, whatever your play says as a wide receiver is. So in the Tennessee offense, when they put those wide receivers out wide, they are giving them reads. So they're getting that isolation we talked about with the defensive backs, and they're looking at that, and it's up to them to decide, is the defensive back and the defensive coverage going to try to keep them along the sideline and leave the middle open, or is the defense going to gravitate to the middle to make sure they don't give up anything big over the middle? And so the outside play is open. And so they kind of adapt their routes at the snap to what they see. And the goal is for the quarterback and the wide receiver to both make a read and get on the same page. And so if the quarterback, hopefully in Josh Heupel's offense, sees the same thing that the wide receiver sees, let's say that the coverage pushes hard. They want to use leverage, as they call it. And leverage is where you pin the guys to the sideline, or you pin the guys to where you want to have them. So I'm not doing a very good job of describing leverage. And look, again, there are people who are much smarter football people than me, but I just want you to understand this a little bit so we all see it. Let's say they're trying to pin the guys up against the sideline and use the sideline as their help. So they don't want anything to break down the sideline, and they think that's where the play might go. Well, if the wide receiver sees the defense cheating that way, then they're going to make the read to cut their route hard to the inside. And if those linebackers we talked about are pulled all the way up towards the offensive line, trying to make sure a running back doesn't break free or the quarterback doesn't break free on the run, then there's going to be a lot of space in the middle of the field. So they cut to that middle of the field, they go find space, and the quarterback's supposed to see that him at the same time the receiver sees it, and then plan to make the throw and the connection in the middle of the field. Again, big play. So another way in which our defense is just built, and one of the reasons that Tennessee has had so much trouble against Georgia in the Kirby Smart era, and since Josh Heupel took over, is that Georgia has, the strength of our team, we've had defensive backs who have been first, second, and third round draft picks each of the last few years. Malachi Starks is a safety, he's a first round draft pick. We have Dylan Everett this year. I don't know if he's going to be a first round draft pick, but he's going to be a first through third round draft pick. We've had other other defensive backs who've also been first through third round draft picks over the last couple of years. So every other team they're playing, they may be going against defensive backs who just don't have the kind of talent, and they don't have the physical skills and gifts that a lot of our guys have, and they haven't been coached by Kirby Smart. So who is a defensive guru and a defensive back guru, and who else was a defensive back guru that he learned from? Nick Saban. Nick Saban's first job in football was coaching defensive backs. So there's a long lineage here, and this is this makes it tough because our defensive backs are good enough and athletic enough and strong enough in many cases to read whatever the receivers are reading, or even to know what they might be reading and then try to get them to make the wrong choice. And if the quarterback and the wide receiver are not seeing the same thing, because again, it's not a traditional offense where the route is called and the quarterback expects the player to be in a certain position because that's the route called. They have to get on the same page. And so when they don't, that's when you'll see these misfires. And they don't sustain drives. And when they don't sustain drives, then all of a sudden all that yardage and the time of possession that they get imbalanced in gets even worse, and things go downhill for Tennessee when they're playing Georgia. So if things are going to go well for Georgia today, you're going to see the same thing. You're going to see some passes that don't connect on the outside. You're going to see passes where they get the ball quickly to the outside, it seems, but we get out there and cover that immediately and either stop it for no gain or a loss or a very short gain. And you're going to see them take some shots deep and maybe not be open. In the previous games that we've played, they haven't been completely devoid of any deeper downfield passes, but not many. So in the way they're playing regularly, or the way they're playing today, or against other teams, the way we've seen them putting up these offense, they're connecting on deep shots all over the place. I looked up some highlights from their game against East Tennessee State. And I will say that Joey Aguilar looks a little athletic. He looks like he has some ability to scramble. And one of the plays, for instance, that was a highlight play for them was like a 53-yard touchdown to the 5-star wide receiver I mentioned, who they think should be coming on this year. It was not much of a factor last year, but Mike Matthews. And in this play, Aguilar broke out of the pocket, scrambled to his left, and as a guy was crashing in towards him on the run, he launches a throw. So this may speak to the fact that he has some pretty good arm strength, which is important in the Josh Heupel offense. He, on the run, unleashes a throw about 40 or 50 yards in the air, at least about 40-something yards in the air, maybe more. And this fellow, Mike Matthews, essentially there's 4 people that come together, a Tennessee receiver and 2 defensive backs, all kind of end up in the same area. And Matthews out jumps them all, comes out with the ball. The other 3 people all either kind of crash into each other or onto the ground. And he just trots the remaining 2 or 3 yards in the end zone for what I think was listed as a 53-yard touchdown. So could that play happen against us? Sure. We've seen busted coverage. Any team can have busted coverage. And another mantra that I've always said, and if you've been with me, one of my friends or fans who we've talked with before, he said, I've always pointed out that there is no defense for the perfect pass, which is why all of football, first pro football and then college football, have moved away in my lifetime when I was a kid to 3 yards in a cloud of dust, run, because you control the clock, you control the game, and you run the ball. Everybody's moved away from that to passing offenses, because if you can get the right wide receivers and the right blocking and the right quarterback, there is no defense for the perfect pass. You will always beat the other guy. Okay. So So when you throw the perfect pass, and I'm not saying this pass was perfect, but I'm saying it was a play that was a big play for Syracuse, not against Syracuse, against East Tennessee State University, for Tennessee last week, that looked to me like a play where I just have to wonder. I'm not saying we've never had a busted play. We've never had a quarterback scramble and throw a long touchdown. I'm remembering, I still see Joe Burrow seeming like he should have been sacked for a 15-yard loss in the SEC championship game in 2019, and he scrambles around and then heaves this pass downfield for, I don't know if it was a touchdown, but it was certainly a will-breaking play that led to score, and again, we just got demolished 38-10 in that game. So, but Joe Burrow, was a number one draft pick. Joe Burrow is an elite level pro quarterback. I mean, there's some arguments you can make there, but he plays at a high level when he's healthy, and he's played well. So I don't think anybody's seeing Joey Aguilar as that kind of guy. So the question is, when he scrambles like that instead of East Tennessee State University, I have to wonder if the guy who is crashing in on him, instead of Joey getting this ball off and downfield for a jump ball, against, in a 53-yard touchdown, I have to wonder if against us, at a much longer, stronger, bigger, faster pass rusher, if that ball just gets batted back in his face or popped up in the air and intercepted. Or if he gets the ball off, does it get tipped? Or if he gets the ball off and he floats it down there like that, just up in the air for a jump ball, do our superior defensive backs just pick it off, as opposed to running into each other and letting Matthews score and walk into the end zone? So, and that may be a difference we see in today's game. That may be what happens when you step up in that level of competition, that a play like that just isn't available. So Klatt made the point, and I wanted to expand on that's something to keep a watch on. If things are going our way, then our defense will be getting pressure on the inside, causing Aguilar to have to move and maybe throw faster than he wants. The wide receivers are often way outside, so it takes a long, strong throw, even if you don't throw very far downfield, just to get, you need anywhere from 20 to 40 yards just to get the ball to the sideline, which gives our people time to close in and make immediate tackles. And if we read the plays like they read the plays and read them well, and I think what we've seen over the last few years in this offense is that there's a lot of misfires and misconnects, because you have the receiver and the quarterback both trying to make a read, and they're playing against a level of talent in the backfield they're not used to, and they don't have the time to stand around and think about it like they did last week against East Tennessee State, because they're being rushed by a superior front seven. So, most teams that will play Georgia will tell you that that's going to be, we may not have the dominant sacking team. We talked about that earlier in the week. We don't necessarily put up, NCAA leading and SEC leading sack numbers. We're usually in the 30s, and which is solid, but not leading the country. But we do get a lot of havoc, as Kirby talks about. We do put a lot of pressure on quarterbacks. We do get a lot of tackles for losses, and we do a good job. Kirby focuses on the idea of making them make decisions earlier than they wanted to, and moving them around so that they're not comfortable in the pocket, and making them affecting the play is what they say. And we're good at affecting the play. And we focus on that as a team, not just somebody getting a bunch of sacks. So if we're effective in making Aguilar move around, and he doesn't have time to get a good read from the receivers, and the receivers choose one route and he chooses another, and so that's what we want to see today. If we're going to win and the defense is going to be dominant, what you're going to see is you're going to see Aguilar having to go faster than he wants. You're going to see missed passes, which might just be the receiver and the quarterback not being on the same route. And you might even see our guys jump some routes and have either immediate tackles, or maybe even we pick off one of those side-to-side balls. Because I'm not really clear if Aguilar has the kind of arm strength that Hendon Hernan had and Joe Milton had. And that's what you need in this offense. And Nico had the arm strength too. So let's get back to, we have just a little bit more time. So let's get back to finishing our breakdown. So anyway, what I was leading to was just saying, okay, Joel Klatt helped break that down. He said he was drawn to that momentum moving towards Tennessee. throughout the week, and a lot of people seem to be feeling that way. But he did a really smart job of looking at the matchups and the breakdown, just what we're doing. He broke it down just like we're doing. Look at offense versus defense, defense versus offense, special teams, coaching, looked at the players, and he came back to it. He said, I wanted to pick Tennessee. He said, and I think this is going to be a low scoring affair, but he said, I just, I think Georgia, that defense, Kirby Smart's scheme, and the players that they have. He said when he watched the film and he looked at the breakdown and he looked at the two teams, yes, Georgia had sleepwalked through their first two games, but when you look at the talent, there's just an immense amount of talent there, and the defense is playing really well. And so he just expected it to be a low scoring game, but one in which, Georgia's superior game plan, coaching, and talent in this case are going to play out. And again, it's not a rip on Heupel, because Heupel has done a great job. He has made Tennessee respectable again. And as an SEC fan, I mean, look, I think we all should feel the same thing. We want to see SEC do well. We want to keep being able to crow about how we have the best conference. We want to beat Tennessee today, and then we want to see Tennessee go on and have a great season, because it's not going to make us look good if we go in there today and we beat the number 15 team. And whether we win by a point, a field goal, or we beat them down like we have the last several years, either way, we're going to come out of this game today, if that's what happens, with a lot of credit. People are saying, oh, see, we were sleeping on Georgia. Everybody moved towards Tennessee, thought they're the team. Georgia came in, reminded everybody they're the team beating the SEC. That'll be the narrative that comes out of this, most likely, if Georgia wins. So, but if Tennessee goes on to have a very mediocre season, then people look back at this game and say, well, we were fooled. And, I guess it wasn't that great a game. So for our stature, and this starts to matter when we look towards the end of the year. Again, our season-long progression here is rating us against this year's competition for the SEC championship and the national championship. Okay. So when we look at the national picture, why does this matter? Well, we need to either win the SEC and get the automatic berth into the playoff, or we need to be one of the at-large teams. So if we're going to be one of the at-large teams, our record has to speak for itself. If we're 10-2 and several other teams are 10-2, we need to be the 10-2 team that's in the playoff. So we need and want Tennessee to be good after we beat them, because this is one of those games that's supposed to be adding to our resume. So if it ends up looking like it wasn't an impressive resume win, if the Big Ten is able to somehow try to convince people their conference and their schedules were better than ours because they were playing 9 games, then the perception is going to matter a lot. So, all right. So we already broke down the biggest matchup. We did that in part 1 of the breakdown prediction segment, which was yesterday, Friday's podcast, where we looked at the way the Georgia defense has sort of degraded and fallen apart a little bit the last couple of years. Still very good, or a good defense, but not elite. We think we have seen elite play so far, but it's too early to tell. Tennessee has also replaced their top 3 wide receivers. They brought in a transfer running back from Duke to replace Dylan Sampson, who was a 1,500-yard rusher last year and had 22 touchdowns. They lost several offensive linemen, so they are playing with, they're hoping on a freshman offensive lineman. And look, hey, in the same boat, right? We also are renewing, and right now, what's our biggest concern? Now, I haven't heard people talking about Tennessee's line not doing a good job. So I don't know if the early returns are better, or again, they just haven't played a defense that could threaten them. Now, you would think we haven't played a defense that could threaten us, you would have hoped, right? In Austin P and Marshall. So is our turnover, 4 guys are gone from the offensive line and they're losing 3 or 4 guys, are they doing a better job replacing that than us? I don't know. I'm not hearing a ton about their offensive line. And obviously, and in Aaron Murray's breakdown, he expressed less concern about Gunner. He made it clear that his concern is less about Gunner. And he said, sorry, big guys up front, but he's mostly concerned about the offensive line. And I think that's what we all could see. I think if we're not sandbagging, like we talked about, and throwing all these passes just to the outside and no downfield passes, if we're not holding everything back for bigger games like today, then the answer to why so many of those passes went that way is because Gunner either didn't have, that was the read that was open, because that's what the defense give, and the mantra is to take what the defense gives you, or let's say it's because the offensive line just didn't give Gunner the time that he would have felt that was necessary to be comfortable to continue looking downfield for the bigger play. So if that's true, then, we got some problems. But we are expecting Ernest Green back today, and he's the anchor of that key outside spot. So just bringing one guy back, if he's back and can play all game and is healthy and effective, just bringing that one guy back makes your rotation better all the way through, right? So it's entirely possible that we'll see a different play from the line today, but it's still probably our biggest concern going in. So we talked about how the defense has eroded a little bit last couple of years. We see elite right now. Tennessee's offense came back this year, and they've put up the same kind of big points against lesser competition in the first two games that they have in previous years. And so the question is, which one of those holds up? And I leaned on the idea that I think the Georgia defense, I know, is going to be good throughout the season. I think we're going to see stars emerge and new players. We don't know all the guys yet because so many people have moved out of there, but everybody you look at, everybody you talk to, everybody who watches this team up close says this is still what it's always been. You look at the athletes and the dudes that are out there. This is a reload. So, can Tennessee get the better of them and put some points on the board? Sure, they could. Their offensive scheme, and if we make mistakes, if we don't make the right reads, if we don't get pressure on the quarterback, if they just go out and they just outplay us, man and man, mano y mano, and they win battles like Kirby talks about. They win battles at the offensive line, they win battles in the run game, and they win battles at wide receiver. If they win battles consistently in this game, they can put up enough points and beat us. That's in the realm of possibility. They're good enough for that. But we're also looking at them and saying, look, you brought in a transfer quarterback from App State who's been good but not awesome at App State. You brought in a running back from Duke, which has been a solid program the last few years in the ACC, but, not a team that we would look at to be a threat in the SEC. So you lost your 1,500-yard rusher, and you replaced him primarily with a guy who was Duke's running back last year. You lost your three top wide receivers. You got a couple guys that are moving up and they're talented, but at the moment you don't have any wide receiver. You're not talking about wide receivers that people are circling and saying, we're watching this guy. He's definite pro at the end of the season. So, I believe more in the Georgia offense, defense, even though they also are kind of a no-name group. Okay. But they are built on people are on the watch list and saying, these guys, if they emerge like we think, then you got 8, 7, 10 pros in the future right here. On the Tennessee side of the equation, you got guys who are good enough to play and execute and win SEC ball games, but it's not the same thing. Okay, so I believe in that matchup more. So what are the other matchups? The other matchups that we left to talk about today are offense versus the Tennessee defense, and then special teams, coaching, and intangibles. We've already talked about a lot of the coaching aspects of it. So let's talk about our offense for a minute. And I've already said this, basically. We've already kind of covered a lot of the key. I think a lot of this game will come down to how our offensive line plays. I think our defense will do their job, and it'll definitely be, so at a minimum, I think the game is a close game that could go either way. We talked about that yesterday. 3 scenarios that could happen. Tennessee blows us out, we blow them out, or it's a close game and it goes either way. So yesterday I said, I think the chance Tennessee could blow us out, 10%. Chance we could blow Tennessee out, 30%. Chance that it's a close game goes either way, 60%. So that's your 100%. So if you just add that up, we get 30% of the 60 and we get the 30% from the blowout scenario, then we have a 60% chance to win either in a blowout or a close game. And Tennessee has 30% from the 50-50 scenario, the 60% that it could go either way. And they have the 10% that they could blow us out. So they have a 40% chance to either blow us out or win the close game. And of course, that's just me. That's my numbers. I assign that. And I told you yesterday, I try to explain that. So I guess, again, the answer is, look, Tennessee, simple reason I think Tennessee only has a 10% chance of blowing out. What I just said is true. Tennessee could execute and win mano-a-mano battles across the field on a 50% or more basis throughout the game. And if they do that, and we sputter around on offense, and even worse, turn the ball over, then Tennessee could blow us out. Okay, that's the scenario. But that's a bunch of ifs. That's our defense gets consistently beat 50% or more of the plays throughout the game. And how often do you see that happen against anybody? And Tennessee has not been able to do that in the past, and they haven't been able to do it with a collection of guys. Nico, who was a $4 million NIL quarterback, okay, that people think has a NFL future, NFL wide receivers, an NFL running back, NFL offensive line, and a couple quarterbacks that are also in the NFL right now too. Okay, maybe backups or practice squad guys, but they're out there. They got drafted, and the guys that are there now are replacements from App State and Duke and new offensive linemen that may grow into the role and may be super talented, but are probably 3 years away from being NFL worthy, and wide receivers that we just don't know about, but that nobody has really on the radar yet as future wide receivers. So is that the collection of people that are going to come back and solve the Georgia defense for the first time and put up 30, 40 points and just, wow, look at that. They did it. You may see all that momentum this week because people feel good about what they saw from Tennessee and not as good about what they saw from Georgia in these first two games. But I think when we boil it down, Georgia's defense just being in position, fast, athletic, fire, passion, energy in the right places versus the Tennessee offense. Is this the Tennessee offense that's going to do it? I'm saying it's within the realm of possibility, but I'm setting that possibility that they consistently win plays all day long against our defense 10%, and I think that's fair. So the Georgia offense against the Tennessee defense. Here's what I'll say about the Georgia offense. We're all disappointed with what we've seen so far. Everybody wants to see the downfield passing, and we've said this over and over again. Are they sandbagging? Some of it, yes. Look, they've been calling fairly vanilla plays. I mean, Murray and his show, again, broke down that Bobo dialed up some chunk plays and some plays that could have been longer, and Murray either didn't like the read Gunner either didn't like the read or he didn't have time. And when he didn't have time, a lot of times he took the outside pass. And a lot of times I think the outside pass is what they're looking for because, again, one of the goals for this season is to get back to controlling the game. Like we talked about yesterday and a little bit all this week. We've been leaky on run defense and we were not good on run offense. The combination of just how much we slipped in the run game on offense and how much more we allowed in the run game on defense is the difference last year between the previous 3 or 4 years when we were out gaining teams by 150 yards, 200 yards a game and winning games by 20 or more points a game. Last year, we won games by an average of a little over 10 points a game, and we only outgained teams by an average of 75 yards a game throughout the season. And that difference was the slider on the run game on both sides. We gave up 40, 50 more yards rushing than we're used to, which led to more first downs, more ball possession from the other team. We had basically a nearly 50-50 time of possession last year, when most of the last 4 years it had been 33, 34 minutes to us to 27, 26 minutes to the other team. So again, we outgained the other team, we outscored the other team, we outpossessed the ball the other team, we controlled the game. And going back to what we talked about at the beginning of the week, we play our brand of football. We play complementary football. We're not trying to, I mean, everybody wants chunk plays and everybody wants some explosive plays. And Kirby talks about being explosive. But when he talks about being explosive, he's not asking the team to go out there and try to score on every play and then go back to the sideline. He wants to see them not get in 3rd and 8. He wants to see them have a few easy first downs. Let's get first. Let's on 1st and 10. Let's run the ball up the middle and get 12 yards. Easy first down. Now the drive's underway. Then we pick up 3rd down in the next series. Then the next time, let's say, it's 2nd and 8 because Gunner scrambled on the first play, got 2 yards, and we get a chunk play for 18 yards on a nice pass over the middle to a tight end. Okay, that's what he's talking about. He's talking about having some over 15-yard plays in the passing game and over 12-yard plays in the running play. That's how Kirby usually defines explosives. And we need to consistently see explosives. And again, I'm not saying he's not happy if we throw the ball over the middle and a wide receiver streaks down the sideline or a running back breaks through the line and we have a 75-yard touchdown. He's going to be super excited, okay? We're going to take that. But there is a negative when you go out on the first play and score on a big play. your defense maybe had been on the field for 3 or 4 minutes before that, and then they're right back on the field. You run one play, you score, now your defense is back on the field. And we talked about that being a problem a little bit for Tennessee. Over the course of the season, they put their defense on the field. Even if it's a really good defense, they're on the field a lot more than our defense. So our complementary brand of football, our style of football, is to possess the ball, win the time of possession battle, grind out more yards than the other team, stop them from, force them to realize they cannot run the ball against us, and then make them have to pass the ball, especially as they get further and further behind, which puts them in more obvious positions, which puts us in more position to just dial up pressure and take them out. And that's how the game flows. And that's how you see us just build our way through the game until you end up with a 37-13 beatdown. So this team feels like they're back in a position where they could do that this year compared to what last year's team did. Last year's team was not able to impose their will, either running the ball or stopping the run. And so that put them in a lot more back and forth contests. That had the game in doubt a lot longer, and it felt like we had a lot less control of the game. And we did. Those things I was just describing, I've mentioned before, we call those game control. Georgia has been, under Kirby Smart, a master of game control. We take control of the game. We win every phase of the game. We punch you into a hole. We force you into 3 and out by stuffing the run and not letting you get anything on first down. So then you end up in a obvious passing like 3rd and 13 because you lost yards on your first 2 plays just trying to get a run or just trying to throw a quick screen pass. And now you're in 3rd and 13 and we come after you. And even if we don't sack you, we make you throw the ball off schedule, and then you punt and we get the ball back and we chunk our way down the field 5, 8, 10 yards at a time and score. And now that whole sequence is chewed up, 40% of the quarter. You had the ball a little bit, we had the ball more, we scored, now you're 7 behind. You keep doing that all game, and you just impose your will, and you control the game. And you end up with more yards, more points, more time of possession, and you look dominant. So that's our game plan. That's what we try to play. And I think this year's defense looks like it can get back to that. So far, they have stoned the run. And it looks like we've got the dudes to do it, and we've really emphasized that. We've also seen that we have run better so far. We're averaging 190, 200 yards a game rushing right now. So, again, weaker competition. But last year, we didn't even do that against weaker competition. We were still throwing the ball around to put up the yards and the points. So, and we have the element of a running quarterback. So in the first game, you saw Gunner call his own number on the RPO and keep the ball 10 times, ran for 73 yards and 2 touchdowns. Okay. Little flair too. Like on the first one, he, backed his way into the end zone and pointed at the defensive back that he left smoked on the ground as he crossed the goal line. So a little bit of flair from Gunner on that one. Last week, he held onto the ball more and tried to make passes, but the passes were, I was talking about an extension of the run game. Kirby is happy to see us continue that ball control idea by getting the ball to the outside and getting 3, 4, 5 yards. It's boring as a pass, but it controls the game. You hold on to the ball, you grind out yards, you get you get first downs, you get points, and you keep the other team off the field, and you get your defense a chance to make adjustments and be ready and go back out there and stone them again. So complementary football. So it's not like, look, the 28 points against Austin Peay was disappointing, but it's a weird game, right? It was weather delayed. It just had a weird and odd flow. And some of what I just talked about, we did that to ourselves. Like in the 3rd, 4th quarter, when we put out that 17 play, 99-yard drive that eats 8.5 minutes off the clock. Well, there's just so much you're going to score. I mean, there's only 15 minutes in a quarter. So if you if you use your drives to grind out 5 and 8 minute drives every time, you're going to lessen the number of drives both teams get in the game, right? So it's going to be hard to get into the 50s when you're grinding out 8-minute drives. So, but it's not hard to score in the high 20s or the mid 30s. And it's also not hard in that scenario to keep the other team from having the ball enough when they are going to have a harder time against your defense than you're having against them. So maybe they get off 1 or 2 drives, but you cut down the number of drives they have. And so all of a sudden, you put up 28, you think, where's the big offense? Well, if they only put up 3 or 8 or not 8 is a weird number, but 7 or even 13, then you have a solid win, 28-13. Now, that's not exciting against Austin Peay, but I think every one of us will sign up for it today. And a point I've been making all along in this discussion is we're not going to play differently whether we're playing Austin Peay or whether they're playing Tennessee. So the result could be the same. We're just as likely to see our team go out and win 28-3, 28-6 today as we did last week, because we're going to play the same game. And the offense didn't feel dynamic these last couple weeks, but it's worth noting, look, they're averaging over 30-something points a game, okay? Would have been more last week. They should have scored before the half and been 21-3. They could have and should have scored on the times we turned over the ball. Now, you're going to have turnovers. You can't just say, oh, well, we turned over the ball, we didn't score. You're going to have turnovers throughout the year. But we have been a plus turnover team, maybe not in any one game, but over the last 4 or 5 years. And so is Tennessee, by the way. It's another thing Josh Heupel's done really well. They are a plus turnover team. So he has taught them and coached them to hold on to the ball. So I don't know that we're going to see, if these games play out the way they have, I don't know that we're going to see a ton of turnovers being the huge difference maker. Could be, because it's early in the season and both teams are more prone in a first big game like this to make those mistakes. But I wouldn't count on that as being the decisive thing. What I think what can happen though, or what I'm saying is, look, we ground out a 488 yards against Marshall, 421 yards against Austin Peay. It's anytime you go over 400 yards, I guess if we're grading on the grade scale in the old fashioned 90 to 100, you get over 400 yards, you got a 90. If I'm the teacher, I'm like, okay, you got a 90. You get 488 yards, that's a 95 or 96. You get 588 yards, that's A+, okay? So, and again, doesn't matter what team it is. That's the standard, right? We play to our standard. So we played our game, and it may not have looked great, and you may have felt like it was boring, and you may have seen a bunch of short passes, but we're averaging 450 yards a game. So if our team plays the way it's played the last couple weeks, and we put up 400 yards of offense, and we hold Tennessee to under 300 yards of offense, and you don't have a strange turnover ratio, then I think you'll see Georgia win the game. And I think that's more likely because our offense, I think there's every reason to believe, look, Tennessee's defense was the best it's ever been last year. It was a top level defense, 16 points a game, under 300 yards a game. So far this year, against this weaker competition that we've been all excited about their offense, they're giving up just about 300 yards a game, just under. And they're giving up about 20 points a game. Syracuse scored 26. East Tennessee State scored 17. A lot of that goes back to what we're talking about. You score so quickly. You have so many drives in the game. They had 15 drives. Tennessee had 15 drives. They scored on 12 of 15 drives against East Tennessee State. But that means that East Tennessee State got the ball back after every one of those scores. So they had a ton of drives too, right? That's the complementary nature we're talking about. So, I think that the early returns are, look, they had a guy by the name of James Pierce that everybody wanted to see in the pros last year. He had 7.5 sacks, 5.5 tackles for losses, 10 quarterback hurries. He was a top defensive line guy, pass rush guy. Their other main sack artist was a guy named Omar Norman Lott. He had 4 sacks, 3 quarterback hurries. So they lost some of their we talked about that early in the week. They lost some of their top front people on defense. They've replaced them. They got new guys, and a couple guys who were on the team. A guy named Josephs, who was on the team last year, had 1.5 sacks and 7.5 tackles for loss last year, 8 quarterback hurries. He's already got 2 sacks so far this year. So he's back out there doing it. Another guy named, where did I see him before? Arian Carter. Arian Carter had 68 tackles last year, 6.5 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hurries. He's already got a sack, and he's been effective so far this year. So I think that their defense has reloaded more than it ever has before. But they also have another problem we hadn't talked about. You've probably seen it out there. Their top 2 defensive backs, cornerbacks, one of whom is considered an NFL prospect, are out for this game. So that's not going to help anything. It may not be the most determinative thing, especially if we can't get the ball off and throw downfield. And look, they've had a lot of sacks. They've had 8 sacks in 2 games so far against the weaker competition. We haven't. We haven't had a ton of sacks. We've had like 3 sacks. We've had 6.5 tackles for loss in each of the first couple games. But they've played opportunistic on defense. They've had a lot of snaps, like we've talked about already. but they're also giving up some yards and points. And they are replacing some top level people from last year. So I think that, and they're not necessarily replacing them with as many guys that are, future NFLers as our team is. And one guy that is a future NFLer for sure is not playing, who's one of their cornerbacks. Well, not a future NFLer for sure. I don't know his for sure, but people are looking at him that way. For sure, he's one of their guys that people are looking at as an NFLer. So he's not playing. So, and our offense is going to play. I think that, Tennessee will want to try to get after us. I think they've seen what we've all seen, and they think if we can put pressure on Gunner, that he's going to have a hard time making downfield throws. But I think what we've seen is, even if that's true, we've got guys who can win mano-a-mano on the outside. Colby Young can win. He's shown you that. He can catch a ball and then push forward and get a first down. And Noah Thomas looks like that. We haven't seen that kind of guy, but he was that kind of guy at Texas A&M, and he's on the team this year. He's a guy anybody would have wanted, and he's on our team as a transfer. And then same thing, Zachariah Branch. Zachariah Branch, in the limited time we've seen him, has shown that he is, electricity waiting to happen. So Nate Frazier, we know what he is at running back. We're seeing our three-headed running back emerge. Dwight Phillips is that lightning speed guy who comes in for the change of pace. Chauncey Bowens looks like the thunder, and Nate Frazier's the workhorse. And our line has done a pretty good job. They haven't been awesome. There have been some breakdowns and a few tackles in the backfield. But generally speaking, there have been good holes. And guys, we saw a lot of good runs last week where guys had 6, 8, 7, 9 yards right up the middle or right up around the tackles. And that's better than what we saw last year. If guys can get 4 or 5 yards, 3 or 4 yards before they're then fighting for yards for another 3 or 4 yards, that's something we didn't see last year. Last year, we saw guys having to try to break tackles in the backfield or at the line and maybe getting 2 or 3 yards. So we pulled out of the run. We ran the ball 100 less times than we did in most years going forward. This year, we're running the ball, a nice balanced pass run. We're putting up 200 yards a game rushing right now against that weaker competition. But I think everything we've done that hasn't been dynamic but has led to 400 and more yards, 450 yards a game in offense, can be done against most defenses, and including Tennessee's defense. I don't think Tennessee brings anything to the table, especially without their cornerbacks, that makes me feel like if we get pass protection, and I think we're going to see some plays we haven't seen yet. So we're going to take some shots downfield. You're going to see the tight ends get involved more. And I think you're going to see our team do a better job of moving the ball from run to inside passes to outside passes and back and forth, and keep the Tennessee defense moving. And if our defense keeps the Tennessee defense on the field by keeping their offense off the field, the more opportunity we have. If they come at Gunner, he's shown that he's elusive. He's probably not going to take sacks. He hasn't taken a sack yet. He's been under pressure, but more often than not, when he's been under pressure, he's made positive yardage. And that kills defenses. As you know, as a fan, you've watched it. You see our pass rush come in, you think we've got them, big third down play, we're going to get them off the field. And, whenever it's happened to us, it's just a backbreaker, right? Guy scrambles out, gets the first down. You're like, oh. Or sometimes maddeningly, it's third down, but it's around midfield, and he gets just over midfield, and it ends up in 4th and 1 or 4th and 2 because it was 3rd and 10, and he got 8 or 9 yards, which then often leads to the other team deciding to go for it on the other side of the field, short down. So we had that happen to us a lot last year because we were not controlling the run. Well, this year, I think we're that team that we're not just relying on the running backs this year, and the running backs look better and more dynamic. The line blocking has been an emphasis, and they look like they've opened up holes and done a good job. And now you've got the the gunner dynamic, where he is a runner and he can call his own number, or if the play breaks down, he can then call his own number. And I think that that's going to make a difference. You may not see some of the lightning passes over the middle that we've seen in recent years with Carson Beck, and Gunner has an arm, so don't get me wrong. But, you may not see that as much as our main mode of moving downfield, as you just see a grind it out, can't stop them, because they just keep getting yards offense, which is what we put up the last couple days. But against Tennessee, if Tennessee doesn't score and our defense does their job and we possess the ball and keep moving down the field, you could have a blowout, going back to that scenario, but a different kind of blowout. Georgia might win. If Georgia wins in a blowout today, I doubt it's going to be 41-10, like we've seen in some recent years. or 38-13 or something like that. If Georgia wins a blowout, it's going to be a low score blowout, I think, where our defense just stymies them and our offense just grinds. And that complementary football, I mean, could be 17-3. I don't know if that's a blowout. That's 2 touchdowns, but still, it would certainly exceed the spread or the expectations. But let's say it's 24-3. That's a 21-point win. That's right up there with as good as any. It won't look as fancy as 44-10, which just is eye popping, right? But if we go out there and assert our will, I think we could easily win this game 24-3, 24-7, 27-10. And I would put that on the blowout side. Anything that's a 3-score game, I'm going to call a blowout in an SEC game on the road. So I think that's well within reach. I think it's the 30% scenario, and I'm sort of buying into what everybody else says. That's me moving with everybody else saying, in recent years, I probably would have said it's a 50% scenario. But in this year, our offense hasn't shown everything we think it could. We think it might be there, but we don't know it. So we're going to have to wait and see. And if we wait and see, then I'm not going to call it and say, oh, that's definitely happening. I'm just saying it could. And Tennessee's defense doesn't look as dynamic and good as it was last year. And I don't see them being able to. I think they'll try to put pressure on us, and I think you'll see some pressure, but that may backfire, I guess is what I'm saying. So I think the scenario where we grind it out, is very likely. I think there's also a scenario where Gunnar just fools us all. Gunnar comes out, hits some 20, 25-yard passes, chunk plays over and over again in different really clever routes that we haven't seen so far. Tennessee is overwhelmed, and the game gets away from them, and it's 38-17. That's still within reason, okay? That could happen. But I think that's the least likely scenario of the way we win or the way we blow them out. I think the more likely scenario, and this is where everybody's moving. I was talking about Seth Emerson, Joe Rexrod, Joel Klatt, people that I've read, watched, Aaron Murray. Everybody's kind of leaning towards, whether they're picking Tennessee or not, everybody's leaning to this being a low-scoring, close game. And Vegas thinks that too. And I've told you how much I respect where Vegas comes. I think a real telling sign is that the over-under is like 50-50.5. So like I said yesterday, you add that up. If we were to win the game 27-23, that's 50 points. So that would be right at the mark. And I think we're probably looking at something. I don't know if it's going to be quite like the LSU Clemson game, like 17-10, but it certainly could be. But I think 20-something to teen-something seems about right. So that's our offense versus their defense. Special teams and coaching. I'm not going to say a lot about coaching. We've kind of talked coaching all week. Special teams, I guess I just remind you, look, Brett Thorson's back, and he's a weapon. And this will be his second game, I guess. I don't think he punted in the first game. He punted last week. So he's back. Drew Miller has been great as backup, even if there's some reason Brett can't go. Peyton Woodring has been excellent. They have a good kicker who's back this year. He was 20 of 26 last year, but Woodring was better. And Woodring didn't miss anything under 50. The only kicks that Woodring missed was like a plus 50-yarder in the rain and one other one or something like that. So Woodring is fantastic. We've had touchbacks on every kickoff. We have the potential for breakaway punt returns and kickoff returns with Zachariah Branch. So I think the special teams definitely, I think they're probably good or solid on special teams, but we have the ability to be special. And so that could be something that is a separator or a difference maker in today's game. So, like I said, we've already covered the coaching. We know what's going on there between how Josh Heupel coaches. We talked about him being a good coach, restoring Tennessee, but we know who Kirby Smart is, and we know what the style of these teams are. And we've talked about that all in our analysis. So I think you can look at it and say, I think there's strong reason to believe that we either surprise people, or either way, the offense does what it has been doing and grinds out the game. And the defense, I think, is going to really pop. So what do I think is going to happen? I'm kind of leaning towards the idea that it is the discussion we've talked about, which is a close game. I think the most likely scenario is it's close for a while and Georgia just continues to grind out and the defense continues to get more and more lathered up and gets better and better and starts making more and more plays. And by the end of the game, I think there'll be one or two people you'll be like, wow, that guy, and maybe they finish it off with a sack or something and it just puts the game out of reach. So I'm thinking, I'm just skeptical. I think Tennessee could break the curse and get over 20, but I'm tempted to think they don't. So I'm tempted to think that we actually end up winning the game 27. I want to think sometimes 23-17, but I'm kind of leaning towards the offense does a little better. That I think Gunner's going to have a play or two that people didn't expect, or like I said, maybe Zachariah Branch breaks off a punt return. And so we get a score somewhere in there maybe you wouldn't have expected based on the offense, some of that hidden yardage. So I'm thinking 27-17 is kind of where I come out. Georgia wins, and but it's a close game for a lot of the game, and it's a good game. And Tennessee's continuing to make progress, and they're continuing to. They come out of this game where you look at them and say, "Look, they may have lost the game, but they may have been playing one of the best teams in the country under the current assemblage of how teams are built today." So that means you might still look at Tennessee as a playoff contender after this is all over. So the other intangible, I think I spoke about this some yesterday, but I just want to make sure, again, there's this idea people keep, because they're questioning Gunner so much, they keep saying, Gunner's first game on the road, first SEC game on a road as a starter. It's worth remembering, look, Gunner came into the SEC championship game, and it's always a little different jumping in off the bench when you don't have time to think about it. But then he was the starter for the playoff game against Notre Dame on a neutral field. So huge atmosphere, fans for both teams, all kinds of pressure, season on the line. And as we talked about before, Gunner played well. He didn't win the game, but he didn't lose us the game either. And his numbers were solid. He had a good completion percentage. He had over 230 yards. He played well, and he gave us a chance and kept us in the game. So, he has started. He started a playoff game last year on a neutral field. He played in the SEC championship game and led us from a deficit to winning the game against Texas. So I think, the idea that somehow Gunner is in for, and he's been on the team for 3-4 years now. So he's been coached under Kirby's process of taking teams on the road and winning, which he's been very good at. So, and he's been to Tennessee before. He's not going to walk in there and be like, oh my gosh, what's this? He's been on the sidelines for the last time we beat down Tennessee at Tennessee. So he's not going to be shocked by what he sees. But Joey Aguilar, on the other hand, has never played a defense like he's going to play today. And he's never played in a game like today. Yes, he played in front of the home crowd last week, but, that was basically just a meet and greet compared to what's going to happen today with Georgia fans and Tennessee fans just in a frenzy when this game gets going. So I think the idea that somehow Gunner is the weak link because of his lack of experience here, maybe both guys are nervous and make mistakes, but I don't see Aguilar being the steady and Gunner the deer in the headlights. So, I just want to speak to that again too. That's another thing that had been in the momentum this week, and I don't see that. I have confidence in Gunner to be calm and play well. I have confidence in Gunner to make yards one way or another. And it may not be pretty and it may not be flashy, but I'm not sure we need that. So anyway, so this has been my final breakdown and prediction on the Georgia-Tennessee game for Saturday, September 13th. It is time to go watch game day. It is time to get ready for your tailgate, get together with your best dog friends, however you do. I will be putting out a chat, so join me at Substack at the website, thedailydawg.com. Work your way to the chat section. I will chat during the game. And happy to respond and chat with people. I'll respond to chats and stuff on the podcasts either tomorrow and or Monday when the next one comes out. I will put out a message maybe on chat, saying whether or not I intend to put out a podcast tomorrow based on how this game goes. So I know these breakdowns have been a little bit long and a little bit late, especially yesterday. So you got a lot of content to jam in before the game. I hope you do. Please share it with other dog fans, other college football fans. I hope you've enjoyed this. And again, send me any comments your way. Anything that people comment on, I will try to talk about and bring forward because I want this to be a conversation. That's the idea here. We're breaking it down, we're analyzing it, but we're all damn good dogs just trying to enjoy our team and enjoy the season. And this is going to be the first big time. Look, I've said before, I've got butterflies in the stomach. I don't know what's really going to happen. I broke it down. I feel pretty good after laying out what I've said here, but I don't know. and it's exciting. I mean, last few years we come to the Tennessee game. Tennessee game used to mean a ton to me, like you've heard from the history. But the last 3, 4, 5 years, I've come to the Tennessee game and just expected to win. It playing Tennessee the last few years has felt more like what playing Vanderbilt in South Carolina used to feel like. And that's not a knock on Tennessee. That's how good Georgia has been. Tennessee has still been, like we talked about these last 4 years, a team that's been winning record, finished in the top 10 in the AP poll twice. And still, I come to that game saying, yeah, they don't match up. We're going to win this game. And I didn't feel a lot of tension. I feel the tension today. Maybe I've been sucked in with the media, but I feel the tension. I'm excited about it. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I've laid out what I think it is. So let's get back together after the game and let's see. And we'll go from there. Look, this game, let me just remind you, it's not going to mean everything. We still got plenty of opportunities to prove ourselves and build as the season goes on. So, we'll look at that. If we lose, we'll see what happens and why. But I think my real true prediction, as you heard me break it down, is I think we got about a 60% chance of winning this game one way or the other. And I think that's pretty solid. So listen, have a great Saturday football day. I hope you enjoy your day. I hope you spend it with your family, friends, and dog fans. And as always, go Dogs.